If you were a weird kid in the early 2000s, you may have heard of the game Okage Shadow King, a Tim Burton-esque JRPG for the PlayStation 2. The cover art alone was enough to convince my parents to buy it for me back then. I was instantly enamored with the lanky, wide-eyed characters and strange, looming shadow, which was not unlike my favorite movie at the time. Despite how easily it drew me in, it did not sell well overall, so we were able to buy it for basically nothing at GameStop, which I'm sure was the case for many other early players as well. The cover doesn't lie though, the game is quirky and charming and has a very endearing story. While there is a very small, dedicated fan base for it, you'll never see this game in a list of must-play cult classics. The development team Zener had made a couple games before Okage, but not in the same style. In fact, Okage was the only game they ever made that looked like this, and is arguably the most popular of their lineup. Initially it was being made for the original PlayStation, but at the last minute, Sony asked them to make it for the PlayStation 2 instead, like literally a day before they announced that console. Zener were still able to release it about a year after the console's release, so a total production time of 2 years, which was pretty fast, especially for a small team learning new software, and I do believe the game suffered from this. There's a lot of things that feel unfinished, which I'll get more into later, but the main story is still solid and definitely worth the experience. Our story starts with an ordinary boy living an ordinary life who is then called upon to go on a bizarre adventure to save the world, picking up a ragtag team of strange friends along the way, and you can't forget a little romance with a princess, which naturally he will succeed at everything and live happily ever after. The end. I'm almost joking. The story does start with an ordinary boy. He is frequently overshadowed and goes unnoticed, often surprising people with his presence. Your mom sends you on a quick errand to buy bread for dinner, even though there's bread literally right there, but whatever, we'll roll with it. While you're in town, people are complaining about a water shortage, and because of this, most of the businesses are closed, but nobody can fix it because there's a scary ghost in the main water supply room. You also hear that the circus is in town, which gives you a good excuse to ask out your crush, who promptly rejects you. The next day, you still want to go to the circus, even though you're gonna be going alone, but your dad decides to explain his theories about a strange bottle he found for hours, causing you to miss it. Your sister got to go though, so that's nice for her, but on her way back, she is attacked by a ghost and inflicted with the Pig Latin curse. She can only speak in Pig Latin, but is otherwise fine. Your father seizes this opportunity to release whatever is trapped in the bottle because surely it can cure her with no consequences. Or even if it can't, he just really wants to see what's in it. After a short ritual, you manage to summon Lord Stanley Hi-Hat Trinidad the 14th, but you can just call him Stan, as well as his evil butler James. In order to cure your sister, he wants someone to dedicate themselves to him and basically act like a slave to assist him in taking over the world. And thanks to your notably weak shadow, it is determined that you are the only one eligible to be overtaken by him, and thus you are permanently tied to this weird Shadow King guy. He does cure your sister, but in the process gives her a bright pink shadow, which is a give and take similar to other magical beings that come out of bottles. With Stan now pestering you constantly, your first order of business is to take over your humble hometown of Tennelle. You might think that his butler James would have a bigger part in all this, but it's clear that his only goal is flirting with your mom. So this quest is entirely up to you. After talking to some people, Stan learns that there's a treasure under the church, which is also conveniently where the town's main water supply is. You go to the church's basement and your first battle ensues, which is uneventful. While you're down there, you turn the water back on, and the entire town is ready to thank you the second you leave the church. Stan takes this opportunity to tell everyone he is taking over as Evil King, but everyone just laughs at him. This really sets the stage for how seriously Stan is taken throughout the entire game. As you try to go back home, you are told that there's rumors of evil kings popping up elsewhere. Investigating this further, you find the circus ringmaster who confirms it and is even nice enough to give you a map of all the evil kings, which is like a crazy thing to just have, but Stan isn't even on the list. It's theorized that while Stan was trapped in the bottle, his powers were siphoned off by these fake evil kings. So in order to take over the world, you must defeat all of them to regain your power. And so with the support of your entire family, you are off to do just that. Your first stop is the neighboring town of Madril. This is a very gloomy industrial town above a giant smoky abyss. The most notable feature here is the giant gears everywhere. There's even a gear fan club that is definitely making fun of otakus, but this is where you get some insight on the origins of this town, which is to say, nobody knows. Apparently the town was left over from a lost civilization and it's just a huge mystery. This might remind you of the gear world from Rick and Morty, which if you aren't familiar with, that's fine. You don't need to be familiar with it, honestly. But unfortunately, I am going to mention Rick and Morty again later, so just a warning. As expected, most of this game is going from town to town, completing little quests, exploring dungeons, and meeting quirky characters whose interests align with yours just enough for them to join your team. The first of those is Rosalind, who you meet in Madril. She is a short-tempered and strong-willed hero, yet it seems those who know her think she's a bit of a joke. It takes a while for her to actually join your team, but it's clear you have the same goal in mind, defeating the sewer evil king, but your reasons for doing so vary greatly. After spending some time running around Madril and assisting the local kids in solving their disputes, you're finally able to access the sewers to find the first evil king. Up until now, Stan had been hiding himself from Rosalind and just speaking for you, which you already know is not like him, but he cannot contain his excitement to defeat one of his imposters and reveals himself. This is when you learn that Rosalind and Stan have a bit of a history. She actually used to be a well-liked, promising young hero until she encountered a strange bottle and released Stan, who naturally took over her shadow. But this went against everything she believed in, so she was prepared to take her own life rather than be controlled by an evil weirdo. But Stan instead decided she was too fat for him and went back into his bottle, leaving her shadow pink, which I guess is his little trademark. Her pink shadow was the catalyst for her fall from grace. No longer was she an up-and-coming star hero, and instead she was a laughingstock. So she started carrying a parasol to try to hide her shadow, even when indoors, but it has only made her more of a joke. All of this is why she set out on her own quest, hoping to find Stan again, defeat him, and fix her shadow. So now instead of just Stan annoying you, you have Rosalind constantly fighting with him. That was kind of a lot, but she's actually one of the only characters with a real backstory. Unlike Kiesling, a wacky world-renowned scientist who you meet shortly after solving Madril's rat problem. Well, you already met him once, acting like a weirdo outside of Madril, but now that you have a woman with you, he promptly joins your party. I'm sure he has no ulterior motives for this. But luckily, his motives are not actually related to romancing Rosalind, and instead he's just using her as an unfortunate beacon to attract the ghosts that he actually wants to study. This is honestly the best case scenario for this type of character. I was so glad he wasn't just an outright creep. So now you have your initial team of weirdos, and you will meet more later on, but you can only ever have 3 people in your party at a time, and one of them has to be Ari. So you do get a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to battle strategy, since all the characters have different strengths and weaknesses. But the battle system is one of the most complained about aspects of this game. In fact, every review I've read about this game criticizes it, and I have my own critiques as well, but I just don't feel like the battles are that bad. They don't ruin the experience for me, mostly. Combat is initiated by running into ghosts, which come in 3 colors that have no bearing on difficulty. I know that's hard to believe, but trust me, the red ghosts are not stronger. A lot of the critiques are just that combat isn't well thought out. There's not a ton of strategy required If you are appropriately leveled for an area, you can just spam attacks and win pretty easily. This game also does employ like status effects, like there is poison, but there's a bunch of weird ones as well that I don't really understand. Like even after beating the game, I didn't even encounter all of these. I don't know. You just don't have to be strategic. Not really. There is a less common mechanic though, where it's not just like flat out turn-based combat. The turns are dependent upon a timer, which is similar to older Final Fantasy games. So like overall, combat is just not particularly engaging, but it's like totally fine. So don't let these reviews scare you off if you haven't played the game before. Let my critiques scare you off instead. Before I even get into the combat itself, I want to say it's really annoying trying to avoid ghosts when you're running between towns. They're everywhere. They'll pop up right in front of you. You cannot avoid them. The only saving grace is that running away from a fight is a guarantee. It's not up to chance like some other games. There's two real things I don't like about the battle system in this game. One, certain enemies can steal money from you, and it's often way more than you can actually earn from a fight. To add insult to injury, when they steal from you, they run away immediately after. Not just one enemy, but all of them. The fight is over. You didn't even have a chance. Sometimes this happens before you can even land a single hit, and when enemies run away without you downing any, you get 1 experience point as a consolation prize, and that's it. So you get no experience, and you're poor now. The enemies that can steal from you are also not always the ones you'd expect. The robbing rats can obviously steal from you, but so can the seaweed. It doesn't even have arms. I don't know how it steals. The second thing that really bothers me is you are often up against multiple of the same type of enemy, sometimes literally 10 of the same kind. And you can't choose which specific one you're targeting. You can only choose the type of enemy, so you end up attacking a random one of whatever type that is, which kind of sucks for trying to knock them down one at a time. This isn't really the end of the world though, because often the enemies that appear in these very large groups are really weak, but occasionally you'll have 2 of the same strong enemy, and they'll require multiple hits to knock out. And while you are attacking them at random, they'll both attack Ari at the same time, and it's game over. Like literally game over. If Ari dies, you have to start over from your last save. This will happen to you at least once, and you will want to quit for good, but you must push through because there are more towns, more weirdos, and more fake evil kings. The next town is Rochelle, because no early 2000s RPG is complete without a tropical beach area. The only special thing about this town is that it's floating above the sea. Actually they call this a lake, but regardless, it's where you meet Princess Marlene for the first time and another fake evil king. The little story that plays out here is a tale as old as time. The bubble evil king kidnaps the princess and you save her. Classic. This is your first real dungeon though, which has 2 levels and is extremely straightforward. I will say the dungeons in this game are pretty simple overall. Later ones do have real puzzles to solve in them, but again, they're pretty simple. They do provide you with a good space to grind out levels if you need to. The urns are particularly useful for this, but they only respawn if you leave and re-enter the dungeon, so it can get a little tedious. Let me get back to Princess Marlene. After you rescue her, she becomes a central figure in the plot. Stan does attempt to possess her, but he can't. He can only possess people who have a soul. Maybe this is just a redhead joke, or maybe it's not. She initially is very bossy and spoiled, very stereotypically a princess, but later on you do get to see her soften up when she meets your mom and is treated like a normal girl for the first time. Your mom is particularly smitten with her and compares her to a doll she once had as a young girl, but she doesn't soften up that much because you still become her servant, much to Stan's dismay. There's a few other areas, including a snowy field and a desert ruin, as well as more characters that are able to join your team. Big Bull is just a dude bro who enjoys a good fight, which is kind of literally all his character is. He starts out as an evil king, but even then it's so clear that he's just a goofy guy who wants to have fun. Then there is Linda, who is a wannabe teen idol, and you might assume she's just a silly NPC at first, but thanks to your support, she actually becomes an evil king herself. She's an oddity though, because she becomes an evil king purely out of her own will, while everyone else seems to have been randomly struck with the urge to be an evil king, because once you defeat them, they snap out of it and don't really understand what even happened. There is one more character that can join your team, but since it happens pretty late in the game, there's going to be major plot spoilers, so if you want to avoid those, skip to whatever time I have showing on the screen right now. So after you defeat Linda and she joins your team, the next course of action is to go back to the sewers. You know, the original location of your first evil king fight. Every evil king you've defeated so far has mentioned feeling inexplicably drawn to the sewer. Once you get there and solve the little dungeon puzzle, you find a magic circle. It says it will reinforce the attributes of whoever steps on it. So it must mean that if an evil king steps on it, they become super powerful, right? Stan insists that you step on it so that hopefully his powers can benefit, but it just turns you invisible to everyone. Not just invisible, but it's as if you never existed at all. In the very beginning of the game, I describe Ari as easily overshadowed and often unnoticed. So naturally this magic circle would enhance that specifically and not any of the good things about him. As you run around attempting to talk to people, you find that the previously locked town at the edge of the snowfield is now able to be opened. It turns out that everyone here is just like you, forgotten and invisible to the outside world. This is the first time it becomes really obvious that there's something more to the story, and specifically more to Princess Marlene. In the town of Trist, people say there's been a girl stuck here for a long time, but she can see into the outside world. You can even hear her crying for you at one point. Something to note here is the train tracks that just disappear into the distance, but you can't ever access the train station here or in Madril. This is something that is never solved, so don't get your hopes up. One other interesting feature about this town is that it has the most labeled buildings out of any of the towns. It's like a real place with real things to do, but you can't actually enter any of the buildings. In order to become a real person again, you must talk to everyone. 30 people if you want to get specific. This is honestly one of the most annoying parts of the game, but it does allow you to explore without ghosts attacking you every 5 seconds. If you enter the Madril Inn during this time, you see a very interesting cutscene of Marlene and Bayloon where she seems to vaguely remember you, which is very distressing to Bayloon. Once you're real again, everyone's memories are restored and the gang gets back together. You go back to your hometown to search for Marlene, who has disappeared, and the bigger plot is finally revealed. Very early in the game, you are introduced to the idea of classification, which you are lacking. Everyone you interact with fits a certain character type. Heroes, kings, the princess, so on and so forth. This is by design, specifically Bayloon's design. You actually exist in a world created by him, which acts as a giant playroom for his daughter Marlene. But the real Marlene disappeared quite some time ago. So in Bayloon's grief, he recreated her with a doll and continues to have adventures with her in this world. So this entire time, you've been adventuring with a doll pretending to be the real Marlene. I want you to remember this, because it could explain some of the ways I think the game feels unfinished, like Bayloon himself left the world unfinished, as opposed to the game's creators. Somehow, despite this being a manufactured world though, Ari has managed to slip through the cracks and convinced an entire group of characters to reject their classification. Obviously, this is extremely upsetting to Bayloon, who now seeks to destroy you so his world can go back to how it was supposed to be. After this, you spend some time in the desert area beyond Trist and go through a really annoying dungeon. But this one doesn't end with an evil king, it ends with a key to access the geared tower further in the desert, which has no dungeon and only serves as a location for the Phantom Evil King. This guy is notably weirder than anyone you've met so far. He only speaks in convoluted rhymes. If you're into that sort of thing, he does join your party once you defeat him, so have fun with that. The end of this fight immediately shuffles you into the next town, which is my absolute favorite. This place is appropriately named the Highlands. All the houses are precariously placed on these thin, towering islands in the sky with scary little bridges connecting them all. It's amazing. The townsfolk are all tired and paranoid, warning you not to do anything at night. So obviously you have to check out the town at night, which actually has the most shocking moment in the whole game. You find a twitching, passed out man and blood splatter on a nearby cliff. It's really not that intense, but seeing blood in a game like this feels insane. I don't know, it's a little jarring. Anyways, unsurprisingly, there's an evil king in this town too, and he's a vampire, which makes sense even though it's a little cliche. Balin must have not felt very creative the day he made him. So after you defeat the vampire, a new bridge appears in town that leads you directly to the World Library, which is the setting for the final boss fight against Balin. There's not a lot to this area, but it's still pretty cool to look at. The World Library is not cool though. It's basically 3 mazes and they suck. The tall bookshelves and tight pathways mess with the cameras a lot. There are other areas where the camera clips through the walls, but this is really bad. Also, to be perfectly honest, by this point in the game I started using action replay codes to buff up my stats because I could not handle the thought of solving a maze while being constantly attacked by high-level enemies. Mazes are my least favorite thing ever. I have no sense of direction, even with a map, which the dungeon maps in this game are mostly useless anyways, but I promise this game is worth finishing, just maybe only one time. I don't remember being this annoyed the first time I actually played it start to finish a couple years ago. Like, there's no way I would have volunteered to do this again if I remembered it being like this. Anyways, you get through the library and Balin is waiting for you in the very back, obviously. Initially, he uses his weird magic power of classification to pit Stan and Rosalind against each other, but you're able to snap them out of it to focus on what's actually important right now, which is defeating Balin, who turns into a monster for this fight. It feels unnecessary to me, but whatever makes him feel big and strong, I guess. After you defeat him, Balin decides that he's just gonna give up on classifying this world. He just needs to actually look for his daughter, so everyone is free to act however they wish. And everyone basically just wants to do what their classification is anyways, but at least now they have a choice. I saw someone describe this game as a love letter to those with low self-esteem, which I think is very fitting, because at its core, it is simply about making decisions for yourself and not letting others dictate who you should be. If you stick around past the credits, you get a funny little cutscene with Stan, which seems to hint at a sequel, or at least keeps the door open for one. So yeah, the entire game's plot is that this guy created a world for his daughter to play in, and things went awry. This is exactly like a Rick and Morty episode, except way more family friendly and actually quite charming. There are so many things that I like about this game. I love the enemies. They have really funny designs and names that remind me of Earthbound so much. They feel so silly, and it adds to the absurdity of the whole experience. But I don't like fighting them a million times over when I'm just trying to get somewhere. Even more absurd, there's all these funny items that you find throughout the game, things like cholesterol and a punk wig, which are often the driving force behind all the little side quests. Okage relies heavily on talking to people. Like, I would say most of the gameplay is talking to people. If you get stuck, go talk to everyone, and you should be able to figure it out. Every time a major cutscene happens, go talk to everyone again, and chances are they'll have new things to say. And I think the best part is that these interactions are often funny. You wouldn't think so based on the overall aesthetic of the game, but it's actually really funny and like clearly just a parody. There's so many instances where it's making fun of itself and exaggerating typical RPG tropes. It's just not very serious, which is something I really love. But while I think the humor and storytelling is its biggest strong point, it also highlights its downfalls because that's really all the game has to offer. Unlike other RPGs, you are not rewarded for trying to interact with anything that's not a person or treasure chest. You can try, but nothing happens. Not even a courtesy, there's nothing there message. The only time you can find little hidden secrets that are not chests is in the vast areas between towns, and it's just tiny gears, which are super important late game, but also so annoying to find when you're being constantly bombarded by ghosts. Another thing that discourages exploring is that there are locked doors everywhere, and most of them never become unlocked. There's a couple instances where Stan goes underneath locked doors to check things out, and there's one time where he even unlocks a door for you, which doesn't happen in the main storyline. So you aren't even guaranteed to see that that happens. And so by the time you get to the point where he shows you that he can do that, you may have already given up on trying, because not only does this never happen, but it only happens with doors you've already tried once before. So it's like you have to just be trying all the doors all the time to even see these little cutscenes. This makes me feel like the game was left unfinished, like maybe all these doors were originally meant to go somewhere, and maybe you should have been able to interact with random stuff, but it just never got implemented. There's other evidence that things were probably cut out to save time too. In Rochelle, there's a fishing pole, which is one of the only items in a town that you can actually interact with. There's also two characters who talk to you about fishing, one insinuating that you should learn how to fish, and another openly wondering about the fishing pole. On top of that, you can see a shark fin swimming in the water, and it feels like it's drawing attention to the water for a reason. Plus there's all these little docks in Rochelle that seem perfect for fishing. If that's not enough evidence, in the game's files there are 24 unused enemies, and quite a few of them are fish. So I think there was meant to be some type of fishing mini game, but it got left out. This isn't the only abandoned game mechanic though. When you're in Madrill for the first time, you come across a very classic RPG puzzle of crates that can be pushed but not pulled. In fact, the game is self-aware and it calls it just that. But you can't actually solve the puzzle. When you go to interact with any of the crates, you just get a cutscene of you solving the puzzle instead. And then that puzzle is never seen again. This could just be like a one-time joke, but it feels a little absurd even with that in mind. Something else that has a suspicious amount of attention drawn to it, but no real conclusion, is the train station. Multiple people mention that there's something going on with it, it's not running right now, whatever. It's possible the only reason for this is to give people something to talk about, but it's clear they're capable of talking about a lot of other things that do actually make sense for the story. So why draw attention to one of the biggest buildings in town for no reason? It's very strange to me. At the very end of the game, there is a character that's shown that you've never seen before, but is clearly meant to be someone. He literally looks like he belongs in that JoJo's meme, like the stand user could be anyone, but it's this guy with spiky blue hair and a purple armored outfit. Supposedly this is someone Rosalind mentions when she talks about her past, but you can only know that by going through the game files and seeing that this guy has a name. So was he meant to play a bigger part, or is this just like a weird Easter egg joke? Very early in the game, you're told that in order to give someone an item, you must use it from your inventory, but this isn't necessarily true. Most of the time, characters can just see that you have what they want and ask for it, so it can be very confusing when you do actually have to intentionally show someone an item to give it to them, which honestly sums up what the game lacks very well. Everything is a little half-baked and inconsistent at best. The combat mechanics are there, but poorly executed to the extent that it basically doesn't matter. There are side quests, but they can usually be summed up with, I found this thing in a field, here you go, and you can't track them, you just have to remember what's going on. There is a romance system, but it's absolutely incomprehensible. Like, I'm not even going to bother to try to explain it. There are lively towns, but you don't get town maps. Buildings are often unlabeled, and there's locked doors everywhere. You get a choice of multiple teammates, but only one has a real backstory. Everyone else is just kind of a guy. There are dungeons, but the puzzles are super easy. Basically, any time you think you know how something works, the game shows you that you're wrong. It's very clear that the core of Okage is very interesting and charming, which is why I would still recommend playing it if you haven't, but it just needed more time or maybe a more experienced team or something. You could even argue that all of the mystery left in it, the fishing pole, the train station, the history of the gears, all the locked doors, are part of its appeal. These things allow for conversation long after the game has been finished, and also leaves the door open for a more complete remake. I remember it so fondly from playing it as a kid, and it definitely does live up to that idealized version I had in my head all these years. So while the game will probably never make it as a true cult classic, it's still an unforgettable hidden gem for those who do find it.